At Joe's camp in the East Piney Woods, we didn't just hear something moving in the woods. We found structures, we found footprints, we saw figures standing along the tree lines that blended in so perfectly into the forest that you wouldn't even realize they were there until they moved. At night, we watched massive eye shine move through the trees. And tree knocks didn't just happen after dark, they happened during the day too. But the strangest thing we found out there wasn't structures or the footprints. It was something on the ground that looked like writing. Tonight we're breaking down what actually happened at Joe's camp in East Piney Woods. The structures we found, the footprints and signs on the ground, the sightings along the tree line, the massive eye shine we watched moving through the woods at night, and the strange stick symbols arranged along the forest. This isn't just a story about a Bigfoot encounter. This is a field report. Joe's camp sits deep in the East Piney Woods. The terrain there is a mix of piney forest, hardwood stands, and dense bamboo patches that can absorb sound and limit visibility. There are natural walking paths and travel corridors through the woods. And when you start paying attention to those corridors, you begin to realize something large could move through this terrain without even being easily realized. At first, the activity people talked about sounded familiar. Tree structures, movement in the woods, tree knocks. But the more time we spent out there, the more we started noticing patterns that were difficult to explain. Welcome to the Deep Woods Paranormal Podcast. My name is Matt Harvey. I am the founder and lead investigator of Deep Woods Paranormal. I'm also the host of the Deep Woods Paranormal Podcast. This is the show where we explore real encounters, unexplained activity, and investigations that take place deep in the woods and remote places most people never go. If you're interested in Bigfoot encounters, cryptids, real paranormal investigations, you're in the right place. Now let's get back to Joe's camp. I really want to dive into the evidence that we found. So let's talk about the 10 talking points. Number 1, arriving at Joe's camp. Number 2, the first signs something was happening. Number 3, tree structures and tree teepees. Number 4, footprints and ground signs. Number 5, the stick symbols. Number 6, daytime sightings. Number 7, how they blended into the tree line. Number 8, nighttime activity and eye shine. Number 9, tree knocks day and night. And number 10, the feeling of presence. So when we first arrived at Joe's camp, it literally is the middle of the forest. I was driving through, there's just like, it's out in the middle of nowhere, guys. And when you drive up to his driveway, I mean, the trees were beautiful. Like I said before, I'm not going to get too much into this, but it was basically like a forest. Like you just drove through into the forest. He lives off old logging roads, and he's not close to anything really. He had, like I said before, I've talked about this before, so I'm not going to talk about it too much. He had 3 travel trailers in the front of his property, maybe the first, acre or 2. Again, he had 55 acres, so it wasn't a small property. And then the property around his property was all forested too. And then again, most of it was his family's properties, because they owned, I don't know what it was, 200,000 acres, something like that. Back before the Civil War, they inherited it and then kept it, and little by little it moved off to other people. And a lot of his family still does live up there. So the East Piney Woods environment is a lot of pine trees, oak trees, and other types of trees. It's very thick. The brush is very thick as well. Joe had gone through and done a good job clearing out paths, but something else cleared out paths too, not just Joe. And then also he grew a bunch of bamboo on if you're looking straight at his property, it's like a football field, essentially, guys. Maybe a little bit wider and maybe a little bit longer than a football field, but 55 acres in that kind of a long fashion. So essentially, he had cleared out the first section of it and made that his home, and the back he just left wild. There was natural springs on his property. He had at least 3 or 4 natural springs where the water could bubble up through the sand and the debris and basically make little creeks and rivers. Some of the time when it really rained, those creeks and rivers got about 3 or 4 feet deep. Most of the time, they were probably about a foot or 2 deep, and the water was crystal clear. Filtered and everything. I mean, I wouldn't have done it, but you could have gone and basically drank out of it. And maybe that was part of the reason the Bigfoots came onto his property. Joe has said that was part of the reason. Again, natural walking paths and travel corridors. He had cleared some of the trees and stuff like that. Before he moved onto the property, it was so thick, you couldn't even walk into the property. He had to use a machete and a chainsaw to basically get his way up into the first 20, 30 feet, where he spent a very adventurous first night. If you guys want to know more about that, you can go back and listen to the last podcast. But essentially, where the trees were, they created a lot of shade. And essentially, he's kind of on a slope, maybe about a 25-degree slope. When you first come onto his property, there's a little bit of a hill, maybe about a 45-degree angle. You have to drive up and then on, and the mud. Oh my gosh, we used to get stuck in the mud trying to get up or out of there all the time. He had to take his tractor and essentially pull us out, or pull us up. Or sometimes we just had to park down below, and he would come down with his 4x4 and his trailer and basically come get we could bring all our gear up that way. But yeah, I mean, he has deer, foxes, possums, huge squirrels. I mean, the size of cats. I mean, all the animals out there were massive, twice the size of a normal animal that you would think of. And then I think he had seen some wolves at one point. He had seen a couple mountain lions at other points, a bear one time on his property, and stuff like that. But anyways, so for us, the first sign something was happening, which is point number 2, the movement in the woods. When we first got there and I first looked around, again, it was dusk. I've talked about my first bamboo, my sighting that happened in the bamboo forest. That's, I think, 2 or 3 podcasts ago, where we went over and investigated the area where he was having a lot of activity come from that side, and things were throwing like mud clots and pine cones at his trailer, rocking his trailer, looking into his trailer, seeing a giant head looking in, scaring the living bejesus out of him. And then, of course, all the tree structures, the teepees that were over there, finding things, basically not the way they should be in the forest, finding blinds being made, also finding different symbols on the ground out there underneath some of those tree bends where the trees were bent over. That was crazy. I only saw it started out with just small little thises and that's on the ground, where you would see almost like an X with 2 sticks, or you'd see an X with a square next to it, or something like that. And then it just looked unnatural. I'm like, what is this? And we never disturbed it. We left it be. We didn't touch anything, and they were always near like tree bends only the tree bends. And we'll get into basically the symbols on the ground here further down. But yeah, so then I had a sighting in the day. I was kind of walking around the next morning after Joe and I went into the bamboo forest, and of course we'd had, I'd seen all those things run out of the forest onto the road next to it, and that's basically where they were fleeing to. I think that was their safe haven, and they went onto the property next door, which was really overgrown. That was where Joe's cemetery was, and that area, talk about creepy. I mean, I don't get scared very often, but that was creepy over there. So yeah, the next day I had a sighting, daytime sighting, where I couldn't quite see what it was. I was looking at it, and I just saw something move, and I realized, oh my gosh, that's a Bigfoot. Or it wasn't a person. It was just too hairy to be a person. It was like a naked person, fully covered in hair, about 7 or 8 feet tall, and it was standing in the shadows of the tree line right out where he had cleared. And I mean, literally right at the edge of the forest, right where the shadow ended. And it stepped back into the forest, and that's the only reason I saw it. But I'll get into that later here. All right, tree structures and tree teepees. If you watch the Joe's documentary, you guys will be able to see that. I'll have to find it and put it back on into the link below here, so you guys can go watch that. If you're on the audio podcast or you're watching the YouTube or Rumble channel, you guys can go look and see that. But anyways, that's over on YouTube. I'm not sure it made it to Rumble. Anyways, so traditional Bigfoot tree structures, we found them pretty much everywhere. I mean, we found tree bends. God, I've talked about this multiple times. But he took me back to the top of his property, and this is about, I mean, the back 50% of his property. So it's maybe 25 acres. Literally from the left side to the right side to the back of his property, where his neighbor had his driveway. Again, it was very wild, very thick. Had not been very cleared, but something had cleared up there, not him, not Joe. And literally almost every tree that was, I don't know, 8 or 10 feet or smaller had been literally bent over into a hoop. So by hoop, I mean basically take the top of the tree and put it down and stuff it into the dirt. Something had literally taken these trees and hooked them on something else, a tree branch next to it, or had put it into the ground, put the top of the tree into the ground, and pulled dirt up around it to hold it in place. And basically, like I said, his soil out there was basically very sandy, and also had a lot of deadfall. So it's perfect for, gardening, if you will. A lot of dead mulch and stuff like that. So it was perfect for the forest floor. Anyways, essentially there was thousands of them, big trees, 3-4 inch diameter, all the way down to like a quarter of an inch, and vines too. Vines were pulled into hoop forms. And then, at strategic places, we found that some of these hoops, the larger hoops that were probably 7 or 8 feet tall, that had been bent over, and the top of the hoop was about 6, 7, 8 feet tall, had just dead tree trunks, not real big ones, maybe 2 or 3 inch tree trunks, and other branches and stuff, not only woven through like you'd weave a blanket, but they use like vines and other branches to basically weave a whole, structure there with, different branches and different items to create a blind. So literally, like I said before, I mean, these were all over his property. We found at least 10 of them. But this one back in this area, I walked behind it and I could look down and I could see the road all the way down to where one of his campers was. And I'm like, holy crap. So they're standing back here behind this. You can't see them because they're standing behind this blind like a hunter would. And they're watching. Basically, teepees, we were walking back. Joe took me up. And this is, again, guys, this is 4 years of research. So this is not all the same day, same time, whatever. This is basically stretched out over 4 years of research, okay? So just understand that. So teepees. There was older teepees where basically there was just a normal tree growing up out of the ground, and other branches and tree trunks had been snapped off from the base. I mean, most of them were not more than 2 or 3 inches wide, but they'd been pulled, snapped off from the base. You could see where it had been snapped at the bottom, and they were literally laying against these trees like markers. And sometimes there was a couple, 3, sometimes there was a whole bunch. Sometimes they went on just one side of the tree. Sometimes they went around to the middle. Sometimes they went all the way around. But most of the time they were at about a 45 degree, 35 to 45 degree angle, and they were just leaning against there. Sometimes the bigger branches were pulled up through like the Ys in the branches of the living tree and stuff like that. And sometimes they were laid almost at a 50-degree angle with a slight tilt up. And it was just really strange to see all that. And like even in the bamboo, like I talked about the bamboo, there was one piece of bamboo that must have been 3 or 4 inches wide. It had been literally about 8 or 9 feet up in the air, snapped completely off. Just completely didn't look like somebody cut it because it was too ragged. It wasn't smooth, but it looked like somebody had just snapped it off. I mean, I like I said before, I took and tried to break a piece, and I gave myself a really nice bruise on both my knees, trying to break it. I couldn't break it. I tried to cut it. It took me forever to cut through that. To imagine something, I don't know, 10, 20 times thicker being snapped off, what force would have to take to get that to do that? I mean, to do that. And this thing was literally laid across another piece of bamboo trunk that was still in the ground, about 2 feet off the ground. It was laid on top of it at a 45-degree angle. I'm like, what the heck? And as I'm, and then I find more, and I find little, like 1-inch pieces in other places where the bamboo is just, growing normally. His bamboo is probably 30, 40 feet tall, if not higher, maybe 50, 60 feet in some places. Beautiful, big stalks of bamboo. And literally had grown, basically been leaned against that. And I'm like, this is really strange. And again, I never touched anything. I just documented it. And as I'm standing there looking at these things in awe, I mean, the whole center around this structure, all this bamboo had all been snapped off. I mean, imagine a circle about 15, 20 feet wide. And in the middle is just this one stump with this very large piece of bamboo, 3 or 4 inch bamboo laid across the top of this stump, right? It's about 2 feet off the ground. I'm like, what the heck? Why did they do that? And then I look over to the right, and there's another area that wasn't cleared, but there was a bunch of little pieces, again, leaned up against a tree. And I'm trying to figure out what's going on here. I'm like, why would they do that to the bamboo? I don't know, but there was definitely a clear walking path where I walked through. It was probably about 3 or 4 feet wide in between the bamboo. It had been, cleared. Something was using that as a walking path area and was going through there. I don't know if they were sitting there. I don't know what they were doing with the tree structures. It was very strange. But again, they were located all over his property. I mean, you couldn't walk almost anywhere on his property where it was thick and not find some kind of structure. I mean, there was thousands of them. I mean, literally thousands of them. Definitely near paths and corridors. And then, of course, I talked about them pulling stuff, blocking our way, walking back that one day, which was hilarious. Made us laugh the whole way down because they were just like pranksters. But anyways, yeah, the structures were everywhere. I mean, again, you can see. We did 2 documentaries on Joe's Camp. You can go back and look at both those. The second one wasn't as popular as the first. Excuse me a second. But anyways, all right, so let's get into footprint and ground signs. The footprints we found, a lot of the times, Joe's Camp, when it rained. I mean, it left mucky mud everywhere. It was very hard to get around on his property. Not just because sometimes it flooded in certain parts, but it was, you step into the mud and you'd sink, 2-3 inches in. Sometimes some places you sink 6-8 inches into the ground, almost up to your mid shins. So getting out and looking around for footprints after it rained was very difficult. And I think it rained almost every single time we went up there for some reason. Sometimes it only rained a little bit. Sometimes it just absolutely poured. I remember one night we were up there and we were under a 5 out of 5 severe warning, tornadoes, hail, all that stuff. And it was just absolutely pouring. It poured for like 2 hours. And we were sitting in his travel trailer and I had the light off and the lights were still on outside. And so when the lights were off, Joe put a protective coating on the trailer next to the bamboo forest over there on the left side of his property. So you could see out, and it was like dusk, right? But they couldn't see in. So I don't remember what it was. One of our investigators and I were sitting there. I think it was Christy and I were sitting at the table in the travel trailer right next to the kitchen, and it's like dusk. And I'm looking out, and this is right before it started raining. And I literally see about a 6 or 7 foot Bigfoot, about my size, not huge, not ginormous like you would think a Bigfoot would be, more, like a 7 or 8 foot person that's not big and bulky, just tall, normal build. And it's standing there, and I could see it walk towards the travel trailer. It took 2 or 3 steps and then stopped about, I don't know, 10, 15 feet away. And the only reason I saw it was because I was just I saw it out of the corner of my eye. I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. I'm like, that's weird. And so I turned and looked, and it didn't realize we could see it. So I literally grabbed my phone. I turned the video camera on, and it did not record very well. My phone did not. I guess it was just because of the film that he put on there. It was dark, unfortunately, out. But we could see, but the camera couldn't see it for some reason. Maybe it was probably on the wrong setting. So I'm looking at this. And I'm going, okay, we need to document this. So I recorded it. Bear with me, guys. I got to turn off an alarm on my phone. There it is. Okay. So I'm looking at this, and I'm going, oh, okay, what the hell? What is it doing? It's watching us. It walked down to basically take a look at us, and it's sitting there, just standing there. And I don't remember what happened. Maybe Joe pulled up or something. You could hear him coming up the driveway. This thing takes off running back into the forest. And we saw it clearly. We could both see it. We were sitting there looking at it. I'm sure our jaws were on the floor. I'm like, damn, it's just standing right there. And you could see it was a Bigfoot. I mean, it was clear as day. I mean, it wasn't dark, but it wasn't light either. And there was just enough darkness so it couldn't see him, but we could see it. And it was just really great. So later on, another night, when it was raining, I was laying in his travel trailer, and I was sleeping in one of the bunks. And this is the night that it was absolutely pouring, the 5 out of 5 severe risk. And there's lightning. And I'm looking out the window, and standing in between 2 of the trees is a Bigfoot. It's just standing there, and it's staring at the trailer. And I can literally see the water dripping off the fur. I was like, holy crap, that's insane. So we used to try and go out there after it rained. We wanted to document these footprints. The reason it was so difficult, again, the ground was like a sponge. You had sandy soil, you had a lot of deadfall, dead leaves, dead branches, all that stuff mixed into that sandy soil. So essentially it created almost like a great compost. And, and so essentially, unless the ground was like bare or just sand, we couldn't find any footprints. When I first went up there, I think the second time I went up with Joe, when we were walking around looking at all of those hoops in the ground, all the hoops, I found about 13, 14-inch footprint. It had gone down into, it was on one side of the creek where his freshwater springs were. It was on one side of the creek, and all you could kind of see was the ball of foot. I'm like, that's weird looking, but you could see the toes. So I'm like, okay, were you walking barefoot out here, Joe? And he's like, no, I don't walk barefoot out here. Oh, it does, but he didn't walk back in that area because there's thorns and stuff all over the place, right? You would not want to be walking barefoot out in that area unless you have really tough feet. So I found that. I'm looking down in the creek, and I could see a spot where it stepped in. And again, there's no way to print these because it's sandy soil. I did try to print one time, and it just basically the soil just ran, basically when the weight of the, excuse me, I'm trying to finish this thought. The weight of the plaster casting essentially pushed the soil out, even though I dug, put something around it and everything. It flattened, unfortunately, so it didn't do a very good job. So I started following these tracks. I could see where it came up the other side, and I made it an indent into the other side of the slope, where his springs were and where the creeks were very hard to get into. they basically, it was, again, soft sand, and you sink into that, and then basically you just, it's almost like quicksand as you're going down into there. So anyways, the other side there, the footprints continued, and then of course got into that that mulchy kind of like material, but there was a clear footprint in the sand. I think I measured it at like 14 inches or something, so it wasn't a huge Bigfoot. And and then you could kind of see where the prints went on. But as we started to kind of figure out where they were, and the more we kind of did the research, I don't think there was a place we didn't cover on at Joe's camp. With trail cams, I mean, we must have had 30 or 40 trail cams up at one point in time between Joe, myself, his neighbors, and stuff like that. That place was covered, and we didn't get a whole lot. We did get a Bigfoot on one of the trail cams, and then the time I went back there and camped on his property, which I've talked about as well on other podcasts, I got something as well a couple times. I had, like, my whole area was like, there was no way anything could get in or out without being filmed. Anyways, so yeah, I mean, basically the strides and the spacing between the bipedal movement most of the time was at least 3 to 4 feet, if not wider. Some of the gapes, I mean, we found when Joe decided there was a lightning storm. Let me explain what happened. There was a lightning storm, and a bolt of lightning literally came down and hit one of his pine trees. And that damn thing exploded. The whole top of it exploded. It was like a bomb went off. I was there that night. And it almost set fire to the whole forest. And so Joe, when I looked at it the next day, he was very sad to find out he had bark beetles. And these things are devastating. It had started to kill some of his trees. This tree, thank God, was not dead. Otherwise, it would have been a lot worse. I mean, he and I would have been running for our lives that night, probably, if we got lucky enough to get out of there. But yeah, I mean, it was bad, and a lot of his trees started to get those bark beetles. So he went and sold about 300 or 400 of his trees, pretty much clearing a lot of the spots through the back of his property where it was wild. Right? They did a lot of damage going through, getting to those trees and stuff like that, and he got paid for it. But the Bigfoots after that were never happy. They were upset with us, and they put a lot of the old logs that they didn't use back onto the ground so they could drive over them, because again, Joe's camp, when it rains, it turns into a mucky, muddy mess, and with that heavy equipment, they couldn't do anything. So they basically created 2 new logging roads out the back of his property, one on each side of the property, like middle sides of each of his property. And so it just changed, but it grew back. A lot of the trees came back pretty quick. He was going to replant a bunch of pine trees in there with some of the money he made, but unfortunately he passed away before that could happen. So where they had cleared and they had driven the big heavy machinery through, created a lot of mud because it was so heavy, and on these new roads, and there was a lot of deadfall still on the ground, like old leaves and branches and stuff. They used that basically to keep the mud, from the equipment from sinking into the mud. So I was walking over there one day, and essentially I found a huge footprint, the biggest footprint I think I've ever found. And it was probably about 26 inches in length. Now my foot, it's double my foot. I have a 13 wide. Okay. I got big, flat feet. And I put my shoe up next to this. I looked like I was a child-sized shoe compared to this thing. This thing must have been 8-10 inches wide at the heel, and then kind of spread out as it got, up to the toes. The toes were clear, and of course there was a little bit of water in the toes, so I couldn't cast. It was just too soft, and it was a shame. I think I did get a video of it. Again, if you watch the second documentary on Joe's camp, you might see it. And So yeah, I mean, there was footprints everywhere, but that was the massive one. That thing was the big Bigfoot that we saw. I mean, we saw that thing step across that road without a problem. One step. I mean, one gape. Crazy. All right. So let's get into the six symbols. So after he had all the trees cut down, and believe me, there was a lot of trees left. It wasn't like it was completely clear cut or anything. He picked and chose the ones that were dying, and left a lot of the other pine trees there. I mean, he probably had 600 on his property. I think he got rid of 300 or 400, and they left quite a few others. And he had a lot of other trees on his property. It wasn't like he just completely cleared the property. It was still very thick, still a lot of trees, still very forested after he did this. But the middle of his property was a little bit more brushy after that. There was a lot more weeds and stuff in and around that area. So some of the trees left were huge still. I mean, we went out there one night and we were tired. We got there probably about midnight. We got there way later than we wanted to. We decided not to investigate that night. We were going to be there for 4 days anyways. It was like a 4-day holiday. So we're in Joe's camp and we can hear something happening out there. We're hearing clicks and snaps and breaks and stuff. And I'm like, damn, they are upset out there, right? They're not happy. And so as we're sitting there, we finally fell asleep. It kind of died down and went quiet. We went back out there just to look around with the cameras. We couldn't see anything. And so we left it be. And then we went out the next morning and we were shocked to find 2 trees that were kind of left in the clearing had both been kind of pulled over like towards each other. These trees were probably 20, 30 feet tall, maybe had a 3 or 4 inch diameter, maybe a little bit wider base tree trunks. And they were literally looped. The trees were literally pulled down, kind of facing each other, but they were probably about, I don't know, 30, 40 feet apart. And below them was kind of clear, was these weird stick symbols. I mean, they were in all different shapes, like a diamond. One looked like a circle. One looked like almost like a C and an R. And then there was an X, and then one that looked like an S, but not like we would write. It looked a little bit different. And then there's other just different things, like an L, and it was like it didn't spell anything. It was just weird how it was laid out, but it probably covered about, I don't know, they were probably each about a foot by a foot wide by a foot tall. And this went across the whole, about the whole, where in between the whole thing was, maybe 20 feet. And there was a bunch of it. So I looked at it, I'm like trying to figure out what it meant. And I'd seen some strange things like this before on his property, but just like a couple of these, but not this length. It probably went 10, 15 feet long. I mean, it was just a whole bunch of weird symbols, and I couldn't understand it. One was like an asterisk, all made of, really tiny 1/4-inch pieces of stick, like a branch that had been broken off and arranged in these symbols. And they're always, like I said before, they're always located under tree bends. Not so much around structures on his property. Now, I'm not saying this doesn't happen around tree structures too, but it's always around the tree bends for some reason. And it almost like they were saying something to us. Like, I'm pretty sure they were upset. I would be too. I mean, imagine if I came into your living room and I took all your furniture out, or a lot of your furniture out, and I rearranged the place and left it pretty bare. You'd probably be pretty upset too, I would imagine. It was just strange how they did that, and I could never figure out what it meant. And one of these days, I'll have to go back into that footage and see if I can find that exact segment where I found that. Hopefully, I did a good job of documenting it. But I would love to have somebody that maybe knows language or whatever, or ancient language, maybe take a look at it and see if they can make heads or tails of it. So, daytime observations, daytime sightings. wasn't just me. So it wasn't just me that was having these sightings. It was Joe. It was his neighbors. It was his family members that would come over and hunt on his property. It was people that I took with me. I've had several people that were skeptic go with me. They were seeing all different shapes and sizes of figures in the tree line. Sometimes there was one, sometimes there was two, sometimes there was 5 or so that we could see. Usually it was the smaller ones up front, and the only reason you would see them is they basically would move a little bit. And you're like, wait, what? Something just moved back. Oh my gosh. And you're sitting there going, whoa, look. And there was, oh my gosh, look, they're moving. And, like I said, they were all different shapes and sizes and colors: brown, blonde, red, black, or dark brown, whatever you want to call them. And some of them were massive. Some of them were pushing 12, 13, 14 feet. And the only reason we know is we went out there with the damn tape measure to see where they were. And you go into the areas where you'd see them, and there'd be the blinds, there'd be the teepees, there'd be the tree bins. And you're like, okay, that's basically how we figured out, okay, this isn't just a person. And at night, you could see, well, I'll get into the night in a minute, but at night, they would come down even closer, especially if we were in the trailer. You could just see these green eyes, and they were not close together. They were probably 6-8 inches apart. And looking around trees at you, sometimes they were 2 feet off the ground, sometimes they were right on the ground, sometimes they were 8-10 feet up or more, just kind of watching to see what you were doing. I remember one time we had the camera, and I had a special IR set up where I had the IR lights on the outsides of the camera, not just in the middle, sitting on top of the camera, so we could get more light. And it looked like, I didn't realize it, but it looked like eyes, right? So essentially they were thinking that there was a Bigfoot standing right in front of us or something, because they were trying to figure out what we were doing. Anyways, that was nighttime sightings where you could see through the camera only. You couldn't see them with your own eye. Well, sometimes you could see them with your own eyes, but most of the time it was seeing through the camera. You could see the eye shine, or through the infrared binoculars or monoculars that we had. We had a lot of night vision technology. It was always in night vision technology. Unfortunately, we never got any good thermal of them. Number 7, how they blended into the tree line. I've always said this: when a Bigfoot is standing there still, unless you're really, really close to them, and even then, like what happened to me in another location, if they're not moving, you're not going to probably see them, or you're not going to even notice them. They stand completely still, and sometimes they have their arms up, sometimes they don't, sometimes they're like mid-stride, sometimes they're sideways, sometimes they're standing behind a tree, sometimes they'll just all of a sudden peek out. They just, when they, and it could be a person. You could put a person back there. I mean, Christy and I did this multiple times, and because she went with me a lot, or Joe, or whatever. I would walk up behind one of the blinds, or I'd go walk into the forest just at the edge of the tree line and stand there and have somebody standing 40, 50 feet away, and I wouldn't tell them. I would tell them, turn around, don't look at me. Let me go walk up there somewhere, and I'm going to stand at the edge of the tree line and have you look up there to see if you can see me. No equipment, just your bare eyes. And you can literally stand at the edge of a tree line most of the time, unless you're wearing something like really bright. If you're wearing just normal clothes, jeans and a t-shirt or whatever, and if you don't move, nobody's going to see you. And they've mastered this. I mean, they've mastered just standing there. You don't realize that they're there until they move most of the time. And most of the time it's like, wait, something just, whoa, that's kind of what it is. Movement revealed the shape of the figure against the forest in the background, essentially. So, yeah, I mean, that was crazy. So let's get into the nighttime activity and eye shine. I've kind of talked about this already, but nighttime encounters. I'll never forget the time I turned the camera off. We were in the middle of leaving. I was grabbing the last trail cam off of one of the trees, and literally I should hold on to this, but well, we're going to combine 8 and 9 here for a minute, guys, here, which is tree knocks day and night, with the nighttime activity and eye shine of number 8. I literally hear and it's literally like feet from me. And I'm looking around, and I'm going, what in the world? Where'd that come from? I'm shining my light around, and I can't find it. I don't know where it just came. I know where it came from. I can't see anything. There's nothing there. And I'm going, what? How the heck did they just do that? And I mean, I felt like I could have literally reached out and touched whatever it was. That's how close it sounded. And it was really, literally right next to me. Scared the living bejesus out of me at first. And then I realized what it was. I was like, oh. I started laughing. I said, okay, thank you. That was really cool of you to do that. And so, yeah, it was really cool that happened. I mean, that's an encounter I'll never forget. That's something I'll never forget. And but a lot of nighttime encounters, they would come down. They were curious of us. We'd be sitting up around Joe's camp at the bottom of the property, cameras facing out in every direction, trap cameras out, and we always left an area for them to come into. We never put the cameras right down the middle, so they would come into the middle of the property around the trap cams. Of course, just, we left them out. We put them back up after we were done to basically see if they would come back in. And sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't. A lot of the time, we never got any conclusive evidence that would say, okay, yeah, this is definitely a Bigfoot. But we definitely, like I said, we saw the large eye shine peering around the trees. We caught it with the video cameras. And, I go to do a tree knock on Joe's camp. I don't want to ruin it, but watch the scene if you have not seen the Joe's Camp documentary, the first one, where I walk up to the tree and I do the tree knock and the eyes open. It's crazy. I mean, that thing was literally feet away from me. I didn't even know it was there, and stuff like that. Sometimes the eye shine was stationary. Sometimes it was moving. You just see the eyes open in the forest. It's always away from us. It was always feet, usually a distance from us. Sometimes they were moving slowly. Sometimes they would just open and then disappear, or one eye would open and you'd see the other eye blink or whatever. But the eye shine was always at different levels, different heights and stuff like that. And so, again, this is over a 4-year time period where we did a lot of research. And Joe always used to say, you should do it, set a big bonfire out here. And he had lots of wood, so we would build these huge bonfires. And during that, we'd sit around it, and I put the camera behind us facing out into the forest. And here's the number 9, tree knocks, daytime and nighttime. You would hear the tree knocks. And then you start hearing them go off. And then you start to see the eye shine on the cameras and stuff like that. And they would come down just to see what we're doing, and it would only last 20, 30 minutes, and they'd take off. And then we'd try to do the tree knocks back, and I think they could see us doing them. I mean, it was evident that they were surrounding us. They were all around us. So, but we heard the tree knocks day and night, like I said on the last podcast. I got there one day at noon. And Joe's like, hold on, wait. And he took me up to the middle of his property. We're standing there. He's like, what? And he's like, shh. And then you hear a distant, and then you hear another knock, and then another knock, and another knock. And they were all scattered around his property. A couple sound like they came from around, one side of his property, and the other side of the property, and then further away, and then further away. And this went on for about, 10, 15 seconds, and then it stopped. And he told me this happens daily. I hear this daily. I'm like, that's crazy. It sounded almost like it was communication. Where are you? Or, hey, he's out or something like that. They were talking to each other. All right. Last but not least, the feeling of a presence. Yeah, you never felt alone on Joe's property. Basically, because I think, like I talked about in another podcast, once you've had a Bigfoot encounter, like I had at Black Star Canyon, once you see them and you know that they're real, when you're around them, they can pick up on you and you can pick up on them. There seems to be some kind of intuition, maybe, or maybe telepathy that happens between you and them. It's just like they can sense your presence, you can sense their presence. Maybe you're just more aware of them. I don't know. But one minute you're walking through the woods and everything's cool and calm, and you're relaxed and everything's fun and you're having a good time, and all of a sudden it's just like the whole environment changes. It's like when in a haunting, when something's about to happen and you pick up on it and you're like, oh, okay, something feels different. Anyways, this is always usually a strong presence of being watched. You never feel like you're alone. You can feel them, but you can't see them. You're looking around, you're going, okay, where are you? Basically this often happens right before something else happens, maybe a tree knock, or it doesn't have to necessarily be a noise. Maybe you come across something, or maybe you hear something moving away, maybe you hear footsteps or whatever. It was very hard to hear them up there because the ground was so soft and padded that they could walk quietly most of the time. But every once in a while you did hear crunching. Now, again, that could be other animals. There was a lot of animals on this property, deer and everything. So, again, it was the middle of the forest. So, many investigators describe the same sensation during Bigfoot encounters. And to conclude, with Joe's camp, it didn't give us one single moment that explained everything. It really revealed something much more interesting. Basically, it revealed a pattern, structures placed in the woods with footprints and travel paths, sightings along the tree lines, eye shine moved through the forest at night, tree knocks both day and night. Things appear to get, when those things appear together in the same place, it becomes harder to dismiss the possibility that something intelligent is interacting with the environment. Joe's camp may not answer every question about Bigfoot, but it does reveal some things important. Encounters in the woods may not always be about seeing the creature. Sometimes they're about recognizing the patterns happening around you. So I'll leave you with this. Joe's camp was not the end of our investigation. We've done many Bigfoot Bigfoot investigations since we last at his property. But it definitely was the beginning of the understanding of how these creatures might move through the forest without even fully revealing themselves. And sometimes the most important evidence is a pattern you almost missed. So please stay aware while you're out in the woods, and please don't go out in the woods alone. And guys, I appreciate watching and listening, and please hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next episode. Please also hit that like button and share this with other people that are interested in Bigfoot, and we will catch you guys on the next one.